Hello and welcome back to this, our fifth out of 6 reviews of cars that were in the Scalextric 1980s catalogues. And today we're going to be looking at the Triumph TR7. Now I urge you, if you don't have a background with this car, as I didn't, to look at the video that's in the description below. You only have to watch the first few seconds of it to get an appreciation both of this car, this actual livery here, but also the rallying ability of the Triumph TR7. It was quite an eye-opener for me, so yeah, I urge you to have a quick look at that. Back to the Scalextric car. This particular car ran for a number of years across a number of catalogues. This livery started life in 1978. Ultimately, the TR7 dropped out of the catalogues in 1987. So from 78 through to, 84. From 78 through to 84. So 78, 79, 88, 81, 82, 83, 84. 7 years of Scalextric selling this particular model. Of course, the liveries changed. We had the red and white livery, we had a blue livery with extra spotlights, and we had the famous Spider-Man livery as well, that all were produced throughout that time. But the one we're looking at today is this white one. Now, if you had have looked at that video, you'll see that the decal reproduction that we've got here, the Leyland cars, the Burma, the numbering, and all of the other marks that you see down the side here are all reasonably faithfully reproduced by Scalextric. The same goes for the decals on the bonnet and on the roof, and again down the side here. From a detail perspective, part of the detail which I always like to highlight, Scalextric always do this very well, or have done up until now. The doors, you have the shut lines, you have the door handle. As we move to the front, we've got the TR7 logo highlighted on the front, along with the headlights in their closed position, some nice grid, some nice work here, and of course a nice grille at the front there as well. If we look at the back, we've got the petrol cap, and we've got the bonnet, the boot detailing that you can see, and then on the rear we've got not just the boot lock, but another TR7 logo as well. So a very nice reproduction of the car. Inside we've got our driver figure, along with the steering wheel and a couple of seats as well. So again, that's all very nice, and it's in black as well, so I think it suits the car very well. And I think that's really where we then have to start thinking about what's underneath. And it's at this point that I got a little bit upset with the look of the car, and you just can't avoid seeing it. And that is, it has Formula One rear wheels on the front and on the back of the car. Now, I don't know why they would have done that, whether they had produced too many Formula One rears and they weren't selling enough Formula One cars. Throughout the late 70s, they decided that they would create a car that had Formula One rears on the front and on the rear. I really don't know. But anyway, it is what it is. Nothing like the real thing, and again, if you watched that video, you'd have seen that for yourselves. Other features that we've got the same guide that we've looked at throughout all of our 1980s cars, and we've got the Johnson motor, which has been in most of the cars that we've been looking at as well. So the motor with the removable brushes. So if we take a look inside the car, like some of our other cars, so the Mini, like the Metro 6R4, we bend the plastic, and that allows us to remove the chassis from the body itself. On the body, the cockpit itself is held into the body. There are some lugs here, but it's very loose, so it's easy to fall out. Now, that may be of age. It may have been a lot tighter when it was new, but it's, mine is at least falling out. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt though. Very similar to our Mini, we have these tool legs on bottom of our cockpit, and they locate on the chassis itself. Unlike the Mini, the cockpit actually clipped onto the chassis. In this case, it just sits there loosely. But between the body and between the chassis, that cockpit does get held in quite well. causing it doesn't rattle too much, so it's not a bad drive, not a bad experience at all. So looking again at the chassis, we can see that we've got the big locating lug at the front, and then we have these lugs on the side. I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera, but you've got this lug on the side here, and that simply clips into a lug hole on the side there, and then the front one goes into the front. Very clean chassis design, lots of space if you wanted to add any weight to try and improve on the performance as stock. Front axle again, just as we've seen across our Mini, just as we saw with our F1 car, just as we saw with our Metro 6R4, it just flops around, it's loose. Of course with our Audi that was held in nice and tightly, so but that was because that was a four-wheel drive car. But in this case we're back to our loose floppy front, which gives us no support whatsoever. I do want to make a note about the wheelbase. If we compare it to our Mini, you can see that it's actually quite long. It's not super long, but it's longer than the Mini, and the car itself is wider than the Mini as well. So that should, in theory, promote this car to provide us with better laps than the Mini was able to do, but we'll see that shortly. So yeah, Johnson motor, standard rear axle that's clipped in via this normal way with these two bearings, and then the floppy front axle there. The last point I want to make, and the reason I've got this other car, is throughout all of the cars that we've looked at in the 1980s, I've been talking about wheelbase in terms of the wheels, in terms of a normal production car that we would think of today. But actually the important feature on a slot car is the distance from the guide flag, the center of the guide flag, to the rear wheel. So this distance is important. But as you can see with our Mini, and you would see it if I had the F1 car, and the same with the Audi and the same with the Metro, is it's always been roughly the same distance. There hasn't been a huge variance. The Formula 1 car had a slightly longer guide flag to wheelbase, but that was it. But then its wheels weren't even on the ground, were they? So we didn't really talk about it as relevant in that scenario. But it does become relevant, and here's a slightly more modern Scalextric car, and you can see this guide flag is very far ahead of the front wheels themselves. So in this case, it's this distance that is extremely important rather than this distance here. But I just thought I'd raise that with you just so that we were clear on a couple of those features. Okay, so the other point of interest, I think, if you remember when we looked at the Audi itself came out in 1989, and yet that particular model, the A1 Quattro, was successful back in 1984-85. So there was a big gap, a 4-year gap. This TVR, this particular one that you see modelled in front of you here, rallied between 1976 and 1980. So for Scalextric, I beg your pardon, to get this out in 1978 was very quick off the back of the success of this car. So I still don't know why the Audi took so long to be produced. Maybe you do, and if you do, please leave a comment. Anyway, I'm going to put this back together again, and then we'll take it trackside and see how it performs with relation to all of the other cars that we've tested so far. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome back trackside, and our TR7 is ready to go, and I'm really struggling not to say TVR when I say TR7. So we're going to do 5 laps, and the aim again is to see how easy it is to drive, not to do the very fastest laps. My aim is to not come off at all as we drive around. Our previous 4 cars, the Ferrari 312 T3 with its 6.66 seconds, the Audi Quattro with its 7.1, followed by the Metro 6R4 at 9, and then the Mini 1275 GT with a 9.61. So let's see how easy it is to get the TVR around this track and what sort of times we are able to do. So the first lap is an out lap. Bad. It's not, I mean, it's obviously slow, right? 9.68. It's down with the Mini sort of speeds there.
9.51.
Don't want to tip it, that's the problem.
9.38. 9.11.
That's probably about it. Whoa. So we just squeezed in an 8.98 there, so we came in under the 9 seconds. The car itself is very tippy. It's not horrific to drive slowly. You know, the responsiveness is there, but it isn't something that you can have a lot of fun with. I go back to what I said about the Mini 1275 GT. If I'd have saved up all my money, you know, if I'd have been that young boy looking at that 1976 race that we saw, if you looked in the description of the TR7, I'd be so excited. I'd buy the car thinking I've got this rocket ship that I'm going to be sliding around the corners, only to find that it's a real handful to drive. So for me personally, it's a thumbs down for the TR7, I'm afraid. Even though the actual car itself that's modelled here is very nice. It's a nice detailed looking model. There are more detailed models that if I really love that car I'd probably buy and I'd paint and I'd have on the shelf. But if you're into collecting Scalextric cars, then perhaps this one is for you. But yeah, with our best lap of 8.98 and our average lap of 9.33, this car is just sitting below the Audi Quattro, but really is the same as the Metro 6L4 and a very similar feel to the Mini Clubman. But personally, I prefer the Mini Clubman, I have to say. But for me, yeah, it's a thumbs down for this particular car. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that review, and if you want to see more of these, please do subscribe. We've got the final 1980 car review in this series, at least. Coming up soon, and obviously if you're subscribed you'll be notified of when I release that video. So thank you very much for watching and see you soon.